Heat check. Basketball, basketball, college. Basketball, basketball, college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa. Basketball.
Welcome back to the Heat Check Hangout, your number one source for all things basketball college. Your host, Brian Ralph, joined as always by my co-hosts, Connor Hope and Riley Davis. Today we are joined by Greg Waddell of Sleepers Media, Field of 68. Frequent guest on the show. Greg, it's great to have you back, man.
It's great to get the term frequent thrown in with guests.
Yes.
I don't know that there's many programs that invite me back, so it's an honor, gentlemen. I miss you guys.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time for sure. We are in a slower part of the offseason. The Pac-12 may disagree, as it is currently in shambles and crumbling as we're recording this podcast. But we're going to look at some of the most intriguing teams for the upcoming season. Transfer portal is pretty much settled. We generally know the rosters, and as we started to dig in and do some of our preseason work, some teams have questions. Some teams were excited to see how things go because their outcomes could swing wildly one way or another. I'll go ahead and get us started because I know there is a lot of talk about this team and a particular player on this team, probably more so than there should be. But I have Purdue as one of my more intriguing teams. And Connor, I think I want to start there, partially because they were the 1 seed that lost to a 16 seed, second time that's ever happened. They have the also unfortunate of now the only other team that happened to won the national championship. So Purdue fans don't necessarily expect that, but that's in the line of thinking. Zach Edey is back. I just want to see if they can handle a press.
Yeah, and I think having those guards as freshmen last year, you're going to have struggles against unorthodox defenses, right? You're going to have struggles against the press. You're going to have struggles against the zone. But I think now that they're in that sophomore year leap territory, we could see a really good Purdue team. I think they could be better than they were last year, at least in the backcourt. It's tough to be better than what Zach Edey was last year. And by the way, I don't know if you saw this, Brian and Riley, but I got into it with some Gonzaga fans over Zach Edey over the weekend. Did not realize, maybe I'm this far removed, did not realize there was so much disrespect for a player who has the second highest player efficiency rating in a single season in the last 20 years, tied for the highest amount of win shares since Frank Kaminsky, fourth highest win shares per 40 in the last 10 years, third highest offensive box plus minus since that stat started getting tracked on Sports Reference, 10th highest box plus minus since that stat got started getting tracked on Sports Reference. I believe he has the highest Ken Pom Player of the Year score since Frank Kaminsky, and is also the second biggest lead over second place in that stat since Frank Kaminsky. And yet people were saying that, the only reason he's good at basketball is because he's 7'4", which helps. That helps with all those stats. But they were like, well, what if he was 6'9"? He's not. He's not 6'9". He's 7'4". Like, yeah, sure. If he was 6'9" and had the same exact skill set, maybe. But he's 7'4". He caters his skill set to 7'4", had one of the best seasons of all time. He wasn't even the one that lost to Fairleigh Dickinson. Like, he got kind of caught in this whole, I was texting Greg. He got caught in this. I'm near automatic from the inside. I dominate the boards. I open up space for everyone else on the roster. And yet I get blamed because I get stuck in a never-ending black hole of double and triple teams because nobody else can score. Like, that's what happened. He scored 21 points and 15 rebounds on 70% shooting from the floor. And people were like, yeah, he choked. It was Zach Edey's fault. As if you didn't have players who were getting the ball and being a Draymond Green, just getting the ball wide open from the perimeter and passing it off because they were afraid to shoot because they had missed the last 5. So I don't know. I think Zach Edey might be, because I don't remember this from Oscar Tshiebwe last year when I think it was more warranted to be like Oscar Tshiebwe, he was good, but it was a lot of putbacks. Like that's what helped. It was his rebounding that helped his offense. I don't remember this amount of disrespect for Tshiebwe going into last year that we're seeing from Edey coming into this year. And to me, I don't know, that puts like a chip on the shoulder of a team that doesn't really need a chip on their shoulder.
Well, Greg, I know you have an interesting relationship with Purdue fans.
I do. So first of all, I'm so in agreement with everything Connor just said. I'll add a little of my own spice to it, but he nailed it. First off, I think if Zach Edey was 6'9", he'd be one of the best bigs in the country. I just want to say that. Like, and a lot of people, that is the crux of the argument, is like, well, he wouldn't even play if he wasn't as tall as he is. That's just not true at all. Like, you can just make him a normal size big. He would absolutely be a very good center and play. As far as skill goes, that's the word that people like to throw out, is like, he's not skilled. He doesn't have a skill. He's just big. He has a ton of skills. Like, he shoots incredibly well from the free throw line. This is less like of an actual skill, and I will name more actual skills, but like being able to play 35 minutes in a game at his size as a guy who's touching the ball every single possession and like leads the entire Big Ten in usage is a skill. That's a massive skill. We've seen previous Purdue centers in the Painter era that are not able to play that much. Isaac Haas was dominant. He was only able to play 19 minutes a game. Like, Zach, that was the big question coming into last offseason after Travion Williams left, was like, can Edey even play more than 20 minutes a game? If he can, he might be Big Ten Player of the Year good. Well, it turns out he was National Player of the Year good. And he's, I mean, not the only reason, because the freshman guards were good, but a team built around Zach Edey was the third best team in the country the entire season. Yes, they lost the final game, but like, they eviscerated Duke, they eviscerated Gonzaga, they eviscerated Marquette in the first 2 weeks of their season when Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer were 18-year-old freshmen. So I just want people to stop pretending he's not great. He's a really polarizing figure, especially in Big Ten circles, because of the way he's officiated. And I haven't seen a player in my life that puts more pressure on the officials, just how he plays with how big he is. Like, I think there's an argument he gets fouled every single possession, because there is no way to guard him. Like, he goes right through guys, and there's contact that smaller players would get that call every time. And it's difficult because when you go to Mackey Arena and watch this, if you even put a hand on Zach Edey, they want a foul call and they expect a foul call. And it's weird. It's a really strange experience to watch it, because it almost leaves you as an opposing fan or just a visitor like a little bitter to how almost entitled Purdue fans feel to it. But in reality, like, he probably deserves more calls than he gets. So it's a messy situation. I think people outside of the Big Ten that are less aware of how good Zach Edey is are the ones who make the mistake. Like, you were arguing with Gonzaga fans, I believe. I think we've reached the point where Big Ten fans are familiar enough with Edey. They don't make the mistake of saying he's just big anymore. And I really hope that in this extra year that we get of him, that becomes more of a nationally renowned thing. It probably won't happen unless Purdue makes a deep run in the tournament, to be honest with you. But I'm buying all the Purdue stock that I can. I think this is a Final Four team on paper, and Zach Edey's the biggest reason why.
Well, I think too.
And the other thing there, Brian, is
go
that
ahead.
he's likable. Like, as a Gonzaga fan, I don't agree with, but I can understand people getting annoyed by Drew Timme and some of the antics he puts on. Or if you're playing a player like Hunter Dickinson and he likes to make himself the villain, Zach Edey just goes out there, puts the ball in the hoop, and goes and sits on the bench, ends the game with scratches all over his arm, 25 points and 13 boards. And people are like, oh, he's not like it. I don't even know if they don't think he's likable, but like, the amount of disrespect he gets is something that's usually reserved for someone that people just don't like for non-basketball reasons. But he just seems like a kid who likes to play basketball, goes out there, does his job, and just happens to be 7'4" and what, 280, 300, something like that.
He wasn't even the tallest player in the country last year too. So the argument is that, like, oh, he's only good because he's tall. Somewhat implies that every tall player is good. And we can look at just even at Purdue big men of similar size and know that that's not true, right? So to me, that a little bit more nuance is appreciated there.
There's a reason Kenny George is National Player of the Year, right? Like, that
Correct.
That guy, if you're going to throw just big out, that guy was kind of just big. Zach Edey is awesome.
He was just.
And I think to to Greg's point, one of my favorite basketball cliches and something that I believe LeBron always says is that the greatest ability is availability, and that is what Zach Edey proved this past year. He stayed on the court, and I do think it's hilarious. I can't remember if it might have been Carter and Greg on Sleepers pointed this out, that Purdue fans like would live in this echo chamber of, every foul call should go their way, and they're always arguing with people on Twitter about how Zach Edey never fouls anybody and he always gets fouled. And I thought that was just like delusional Twitter fandom until I looked at the KenPom numbers, and like Purdue was one of the lowest teams nationally in defensive free throw rate. Like they really don't foul as a team either, which I think is, it's a testament to his skill to, figure out how to turn himself into one of the better rim protectors in the country last year and show that he wasn't just going to be a liability and also not foul. Cause I think it was, probably about January or February, I remember reading something about how good he was defensively and thinking like this had to be a misprint. Cause I know that was his knock early on, was that you put him in a ball screen, you play him off the floor. And then I kind of watched Purdue, dug back into their film a little bit more and saw like, no, this was legit. Like he had figured something out defensively too.
Well, it's been a solid 10 minutes on Purdue. I think that's good. We got more teams we want to get to here. Riley, we'll go right back to you.
Yeah, well, first, shout out Connor for really like prolonging this beef with Gonzaga fans. For one, I'm a big proponent of going to war with your own fan base. Like, I love chirping at UNC fans on Twitter. But like, I think I had 2 or 3 different people send me like Connor's tweets to be like, at like days after Connor had told our Heat Check chat that he was beefing with these Gonzaga folks about Zach Edey. So, shouts to you for the prolonged beef.
That's okay. We're a San Diego State podcast now, right, Connor?
Exactly. No, that started with I saw a Gonzaga blog, and we don't need to talk too much about Gonzaga, about how Jose Perez and Marcus Adams would make Gonzaga a top 4 team. And I'm like, that's just delusion. Like that's literally just delusional to add a role player to a team that's maybe top 12, top 15 and call them a top 4 team in the country because you add a reclass freshman and a point guard who might be one of the more inefficient high major point guards in the country.
Where are we going next, Riley? Who are you intrigued by this season?
Yeah, well, first I kind of want to make a Carolina joke because Connor saying that about Marcus Adams and Jose Perez reminded me. The funniest UNC fan delusion I saw this offseason was on a message board. Someone said that UNC's backup 5, which would be Seth Trimble, Paxton Wojcik, James Okonkwo at the 5. Who else are backups? Zayden High, and I can't even remember who was the 10th man in UNC's rotation. I'm looking like a bad fan right now. But basically saying that our backup 5 would be a top 5 team in the ACC, which I get the ACC is bad, but I don't think Paxton Wojcik is going to go slay the ACC with 30 minutes a game, So
let's worry about UNC's first team being a top 5 team in the ACC first, and then we'll worry about the second team.
we got to. That's not your 10th guy. That's your 3rd guy. Paxton, come on.
Paxton. Well, I did send this to Greg and Cart, off the air, but Paxton Wojcik is wearing a pretty nice chain in these recent UNC basketball Instagram posts. And he's giving off some good vibes. I think his build is arguably smaller than mine, but I think I might have him beat on, muscle and weight and everything, but I kind of like the vibes that Paxton's giving off as a nice player off the bench. But we can turn to talk about my most intriguing team that we'll see this year. And this is totally just going to be, it's going to sound like it's just for clicks, but I am truly intrigued, fascinated by how Kentucky is going to play out this season. And I think like a month ago, we came on this podcast when they had 7 or 8 scholarship players and we're ready to bury them. I'm sure we laughed at their expense and said they won't even be a top 40 team. But then they added Trey Mitchell. They got Antonio Reeves back. They went 4-0 in Global Jam, which probably doesn't mean anything. Cal was posting selfies outside of Drake's house, making like his typical Cal jokes, which to me tells me he likes his team. DJ Wagner looked way better than I anticipated in Global Jam. So I think that, Kentucky might be back to where we saw them be throughout the 2010s of a top 10, top 5 potential. I say potential because I still want to see it from these guards and the freshmen in action, but I'm really intrigued to see how all these pieces come together.
Well, the talent is there, Greg, for Kentucky to do stuff. It's just they're all young. They're all young. They've added some experience, but it's mostly freshmen.
Yeah, I mean it's entirely freshman. I'm in on Kentucky after watching Global Jam, and I get that like the normal joke is to say it's Global Jam. Like I think I have Jeff Goodman Twitter alerts on my phone. Don't ask me why. And like it got really unhealthy for me to just expect like Global Jam in all caps for a couple days there. But I I liked what I saw. Like they looked like a cohesive unit more than I expected. Like I kind of just expected a bunch of dudes who like would not know where to be and would not really share the basketball and might show flashes of talent, but the talent they would show would be a lot of individual moments where I didn't pick up on that. Like I saw some upside, but I saw a lot more like these guys play kind of well together for being brand new to being on a floor together. So I'm intrigued. They got to figure out the big man spot. Obviously, like it doesn't help that all those guys are hurt right now. But if they just have anyone who's decent at center, I actually think I'm buying Kentucky stock. And I did get myself in trouble. Carter clipped it, and he said he's just holding on to it for when he needs a victory over me. I have a clip where I said I think Antonio Reeves will score 25 points a game next season for Kentucky.
He was right.
Okay, Antonio Reeves is awesome.
He was right.
It's a lot of points.
Antonio Reeves is really good.
If I said 20, are we freaking out as much? Because like I do,
Yes.
he might lead like high major in scoring. He might.
I mean, 17, 18 would be kind of my projection. Like he's one dude I wrote about this in a newsletter for the Field of 68 about how like at this time of the year, I might have said this on another show, but like we tend to get portalized where if there's any late entrants like Jose Perez, I think is like the example to end all examples of, oh, this dude enters in late July, therefore, you know, all these teams have open scholarships. He must be the hottest commodity. And it's like, dude, Jose Perez has been inefficient throughout his career. And there was some dialogue about Antonio Reeves being that had he entered back in like late June, early July, when it looked like he wasn't coming back to Kentucky, to where it was like, oh, well, he went 1 for 15 in their loss against Kansas State in the tournament or something. But when you look at that, I think he scored over 20 points in close to 10 games last year. And that was after like he took his sweet time to sort of acclimate a little bit. But when he turned it on, it was, I think he averaged 17 or 18 points a game through Kentucky's last month and a half of the season. Like that dude, he's one of the best movement shooters in the country. And I think he can do a little bit off the bounce too, if like Dillingham and Wagner will, you know, share the ball. I mean, honestly, with how he looked at Global Jam, it's looking like Rob Dillingham might be the odd man out and could get buried a little bit.
Connor, what are your expectations for Kentucky?
I think Kentucky is one of those teams that I don't want to call them a poor man's Duke, but like I think their ceiling is lower than Duke. They have the same inexperience problems that Duke might have. I mean, I know Duke has Proctor and Filipowski and Roach, but I think they're going to be a good team. I think Calipari's a good coach. I think he proved that last year, that he's a good coach. I would say top 6 to 10 in the country is like a good starting point with top 5 upside. But I don't know if I would go as far as to say that I'm going to put them in the same conversation as like a Duke or a Kansas or a Purdue right now.
Yeah, I think they're top 15 for me right now. The talent of a top 5 team is there. I'm more than likely they'll probably end up top 10, but it's one of those deals where you have so many freshmen. I want to see it, right? Like they're a candidate who beats up on teams early on in the season and makes a huge jump because we've actually seen it on the court, and it either all works out or it all doesn't. This is definitely reading way too much into things, but the whole trip to Drake's house and all of the social media posts that went along with it felt very much like Cal and Kentucky saying it, trying to get like, we're in your face and we're coming for you, in a way that I have not seen from Cal and Kentucky, or at least I don't remember seeing from Cal and Kentucky since the John Wall Boogie Cousins team in 2010. And if if this team is like that team, they're going to be fun. And I think the talent is there for them to be fun. I kind of hope they have some of that swagger and attitude, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
They also went to Drake's house. That just warrants mention in this.
Yes.
Very excited for whatever the next Drake album is, but I feel like whatever his next album is will tell us a lot about what this Kentucky team will be.
There will be a music video where Kentucky players are in the background. He's in a Kentucky jersey, 100%. Maybe Cal makes an appearance. It was probably shot that day.
Also, I believe
100%.
Antonio Reeves averaged 23 points at Global Jam, for the record. Just saying.
Well,
Cal also tweeted out a photo of him and Drake from like 2010 saying, "I'll always support you" or something, which I thought was hilarious. That man is confident right now. That man is,
I know.
He's putting himself back in the limelight, which bodes well for Kentucky. Like that's what Cal does when he believes in his team.
Cal gets some shit for the way he acts in the offseason, which a lot of times is fine because he always pulls the kind of like, oh, we're not where we should be. But a lot of times they aren't. Like a lot of times they aren't. He's just kind of being honest, and people write it off. But the fact he's this bullish, I think, is a good sign for Kentucky fans. Greg, where else do you want to go next? Who is another team that you found really intrigues you going into this next season?
Okay, so this might be the easy way out. You guys can yell at me and kick me off the program if you want to. But the team I'm most intrigued by that has any sort of pulse whatsoever next season is the number 1 ranked preseason team in the country, because they took my best player and now they're the number 1 team in the country preseason. And I'm coming off, just selfishly speaking, of course, I'm coming off 24 months of watching said player be on preseason top 10 teams in the country, only to then lose 13 to 15 games in those seasons while being a giant douchebag the entire time. So I just don't know. I've long held the hypothesis that if Hunter Dickinson is supposed to be like the centerpiece on your team, you cannot be a winning team. And I held that hypothesis before his sophomore season even. Like that was a read I made from interacting with him of like, this is going to implode because he's standing next to Eli Brooks at Big Ten Media Day, making it all about him and antagonizing everyone and throwing shots. And Eli Brooks, this veteran winning guy who has been in a national championship game, was like rolling his eyes at this dude. He hasn't changed at all. Like, I know this is all non-basketball stuff, but like from my read on this, Kansas is expecting him to come in and be everything, right? Like I know they have DeJuan Harris. I know they have Kevin McCullough. But like Bill Self's talking like I've never had a more polished piece. I've never had a more ready recruit than this. So like I don't know what they expect. I don't know if they expect him to come in and like be ready to win National Player of the Year. I can tell you, I don't think that's coming. Like he was a preseason first team All-American the last 2 seasons and didn't win anything individually. So like he's talented and Kansas should be good, but I'm selling that they can be the number 1 team in the country good. Mostly because I just don't see how a program can be successful built around that guy. If you sell me on DeJuan Harris, then maybe I can buy that. Like if he's the heart of the team, if he's the leader and Hunter just plays a Batman Robin role, like maybe. But I also don't love, like outside of Hunter, like is Nick Timberlake actually that good? I know we think he might be that good, but like is he actually that good? He's not Grady Dick good. So I have a lot of questions, and I'm pretty baffled. Like I don't know how that team is better on paper than Purdue, who lost 5 games over the course of the season last year and brings everybody back.
I don't think they're better than Duke, but we can get into that at a later date as well. Greg, do you trust Bill Self's just track record with big men, with Hunter Dickinson and getting the best version of him?
I just think it's such a different challenge than like, hey, can he bring along this player? Like I don't really think it's like anything he needs to add to his game. Like Hunter Dickinson has been incredible on the court as a talent pretty much his whole career. Like I've never worried he's not going to show up and get 18 and 8. I don't know that there's much more there. Like, and Kansas seems to think there is more there. And if there is, like, I'll eat my words and I'm wrong. But it would have to be quite a jump to go from 18-8 to like 24-10. So I don't know. I think the jump that would need to be taken is much more of like an emotional maturation. And like Bill Self is the best coach in the sport, so I won't put anything past him. But also, like, Bill Self wasn't coaching in the NCAA tournament at the end of last season, so I'm not super confident that at this stage he's going to be the guy who can unlock that.
Riley, do you have any reservations about Dickinson in Kansas?
I didn't like until 2 minutes ago, until Greg laid out his case. No, but I know I have been listening to, Greg kind of pounding this drum to sort of temper expectations a little bit. And for someone like I've kind of been team Kansas's preseason number one, really since Dickinson signed with him, sort of looking at like you said, Bill Self is the best coach in the game. And I think I mean, I have no idea what Juwan Howard is like as a coach with his players and how he relates to them off the court and what he expects out of them. To me, it at least would seem like that since Self has been proven longer, he has 2 national titles, he's been the coach there for forever, that you would think, and Kansas players typically, they haven't had a ton of off the court incidents unless you want to knock them for their big like paying players scandal, which like it's all legal now anyway, and they never even got punished for it. So to me, I think like LeGerald Fick is the only name I can really think of a guy who's ever been suspended in the last like decade by Kansas, to where I think that speaks to the fact that Self might be able to truly wrangle him in. And I mean, I think it would be, if I was his coach, he's probably a tough line to walk, but you try to sever that relationship with Marty Mush and sever the whole caricature and persona he does of himself to try to get the most out of him. But I think Self is if there is anybody who can do that, it's Bill Self. As far as the rest of the roster goes, I think that pairing with KJ Adams could be a little bit clunky. And I think with Kevin McCullough back, you have another non-shooter at the 3. But at the same time, I kind of think like they had these same issues last year of pretty much mediocre low volume shooter in DeJuan Harris, or maybe his percentages were better, but a low volume shooter in DeJuan Harris at the 1. They had McCullough at the 3. They had Adams at the 4/5. And they had Grady Dick as kind of their only proven shooter. And they made it work because they got out and run, and they still had a really high like effective field goal percentage, offensive efficiency, all that type of stuff, because they were so prolific in transition. And I think with Harris, they're engineering the attack. I mean, Arterio Morris is a former 5-star kid who in limited time had really good numbers, like getting to the rim at Texas last year, and shot 33% on like not a high volume by any means, but a decent volume. And he wasn't necessarily seen as a shooter coming out of high school. So that there's some promise there and some strides he's made. So
I think it's worth noting with Bill Self that this is the same coach who had Joel Embiid, had Marcus and Markieff Morris, had Mario Chalmers, who thought he was the best player on the LeBron, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, Miami Heat. Like he does not have he enjoys challenging himself with these tough personalities, it seems. And Hunter Dickinson is his own beast, because I don't think, as productive as Hunter Dickinson is, I think you could argue that the other 3, Joel Embiid, reigning NBA MVP in particular, had more dynamic skill sets than Hunter Dickinson does. Not to say that Dickinson isn't productive. I think if anybody, I think Self is as up to the challenge as anybody could be, but it's certainly a concern. I'm with you, Greg, that I don't think Dickinson is, the hands down best player when Kansas is cutting the nets down in Phoenix in April. Like I don't see that as a lot of Kansas fans do.
Yeah, I'm very willing to buy like an argument that DeJuan Harris makes a big leap and becomes like a superstar type point guard. Like if he's just willing to shoot and shoots the percent he did last year, then I could see that for sure. I just like if there's one thing, we know Hunter's not ever going to shut up. He's just not, like, to put it bluntly. He's still doing press runs right now, like shitting on the people of the state of Michigan. So Bill Self hasn't turned off that spout yet. But if there's an on the court, like, I guess, criticism of Hunter that Hunter has made of his teammates through the years, he's been loud about how frustrated he is that he's been on teams without shooting. And like the question with this Kansas roster, even if Hunter wasn't there, would be shooting. Like he's with a point guard who doesn't shoot. McCullough and Adams can't shoot. So I'm very scared that like, okay, he thinks Nick Timberlake has to be Jet Howard level spacing for Kansas to be what Hunter wants them to be. And if there's one thing I'm confident of, it's like if Kansas goes through a little early adversity, first of all, Kansas fans are going to go crazy. They know the price tag that's on Hunter's back. And I've seen that snowball negatively. So I think if there's one team that needs to get off to a great non-conference start, it's the Jayhawks for me. And if it goes well, it probably goes well all year. If they start like 4-3 or they're in overtime against Wisconsin again, I don't know who their non-conference schedule is, but like Hunter's going to hear it. And Hunter doesn't always respond to hearing it as good as most guys would like.
How does it go for Kansas, Connor, in your mind?
Yeah, I think I have them 2 or 3. I have Duke 1, and I have Kansas somewhere in there with Purdue. Um, that last point that Greg made about shooting and the players around him are exactly why I don't have them number 1. Hunter's probably going to be the alpha scorer, and then who's second? Like for me, it's you can, because Hunter can step out to 3, but you want him scoring in the low post, and then you have a bunch of players who can only score going at the rim. And I don't see Timberlake being like a 9-10 shot per game guy. So it'll be interesting. I think the defense for Kansas is certainly going to be one of the top 5 to 10 defenses in the country. For me, it's just, where is that offense when it comes time for, January, February, when they start getting into playing some of these really good, really interesting Big 12 defenses.
Who else, Connor, in your mind, should we look at as an intriguing team that is going to have a lot of eyeballs on them for one reason or another?
I think this one's more niche because I think the most of the eyeballs are going to come from its own fan base. I've mentioned them a couple of times on the podcast, but I'm really interested to see what Todd Golden does at Florida this year. Because last year, I think they were like a top 40 defense, but their offense was atrocious. And part of that was shooting, right? They just couldn't make shots. Now, he returns Will Richard, who was, I believe, their leading 3-point shooter, returns Riley Kugel, who was also a pretty solid 3-point shooter, brings in Julian Rishwain, who knows Todd Golden's system, had his best shooting years when Todd Golden was there, dipped last year after Golden left, but pretty solid shooter. Walter Clayton from Iona, another one, shot 43% last year. Zion Pullen, I've been saying one of the better playmakers in college basketball, shot 39% from 3. Brings in EJ Jarvis, shot 41% from 3. Oh, and by the way, he brings in Tyrese Samuel from Seton Hall, who's a 6'10 center that can play for them. And he brings in Micah Hangleton, who is from Marshall, who won Sunbelt Rookie of the Year, 7'1", 215-pound guy, averaged 7.5 and 10, I think, with 2.5 blocks. So the defense could get better. And I think this offense, if it all flows together and they can make those shots and they can rely on Zion Poland to play make for others, I think Florida, not a top 10 team, not a top 15 team, but certainly a team that could find themselves solidly in the field and pretty dangerous come March.
Yeah, Micah is a Todd Golden guy. He is big. He does all the efficiency stuff that analytics guys love. He's 7'1". He blocks shots at a high rate, rebounds, shoots threes. Like, he's perfect. I know I talked with Dan D'Antoni for the Almanac, Marshall's head coach, and there may have been some early tampering there that may have happened, but we'll not gonna totally call that out yet. But seemed like Mike kind of had one foot out the door after he put up a pretty good season down the stretch there for Marshall. Florida's interesting because Greg, people thought that they were going to have a good season last year with the recruiting class or the transfer class that Golden brought in. It didn't happen. Feels like we're at the same spot again, where he's bringing in a good transfer class, and you'd rather have a good transfer class than not. But I think he's under pressure to succeed this year. Also, it's going to start to get a little bit in that same kind of mold of, well, we know how this goes.
Yeah, I think you're very correct. I'm trying to be politically correct in what I say here. I don't trust Todd Golden right now. Um,
That's fair.
I did. I was really wooed by him heading into last offseason. Like I think the proper word was probably charmed when I met him in New Orleans for the 2022 Final Four. Um, I just bought what he was selling, and he was selling a lot. To be clear, he was selling much more than most other coaches were trying to sell. This whole ethos of how he coaches and how he plays, and the portal ads he had last year on paper were incredible. And then you watch their games, and like it was a jumbled mess. They really had no structure whatsoever offensively, and it gave them rarely ever even a chance to win. It was just like, let's hope our guys freelance enough, and they weren't talented enough to freelance enough. So I'm taking everything with a big grain of salt with Golden's program right now, which pains me because I like, again, on paper, a lot of the moves he made. The other flip side of this is I am probably the biggest skeptic I know of up transfer point guards. And I just because I've gotten personally bit by it so much, like I think you'd much rather take Ryan Nemhard than you would take Zion Pullen. And it seems like a lot of people fall for that trap. Like there's a chance he becomes Jalen Pickett in 2 years. I don't know how many years of eligibility Pullen has left, but like obviously they hit sometimes. There's just so many more chances that they don't, in my opinion. It's the hardest thing to do for any player entering the portal. Like going from a smaller school to a high major school, playing 32 minutes a game, running the show, and being a primary option at point guard, I think is the most difficult ask of any player you could acquire from the portal. And last year, I think we kind of saw it with Kyle Lofton. Like Kyle Lofton was incredible at St. Bonaventure for much of his career. That team, his last year at St. Bonaventure, did underachieve a little bit or a lot of bit. But then he goes to Florida. They're expecting him to be a dude, and he just wasn't a dude at all. So, to me, Pullen is the one guy I'd pick out and be like, he needs to hit. And I wish I could say I'm confident he would hit, but I can't in a Golden offense right now until I see it.
Here's what intrigues me most, Brian, and why I picked up Florida is that I think this is the year that will make or break what people view Todd Golden as. Because remember, prior to that, his last year at San Francisco, I was not a Golden fan.
I was going to say you were kind of in on this early in terms of the ups and downs of him.
He has not finished higher than fourth in conference play in any season, including the season he went to the NCAA tournament. He was 9-7 his first year with Kyle Smith's guys. Terrible his second year, 4-9, finished 8th, 10-6. He has 2 winning conference seasons, 2 winning seasons overall. And I think what Greg brought up, the free flowing nature, that guys need to make plays for themselves, is his style. Which works when you have Jamari Bouye and Khalil Shabazz, but we'll see if it works with the guys he has this year.
Riley, do you think it'll work to the tune of a successful season for Florida?
I mean, I think going off of this free-flowing philosophy that has guys make plays on their own, I think Kugel can do that. Riley Kugel, great player, great name. I think he's got the athleticism to where you see a little bit of maybe that Bouye type ability to just get into the paint, dunk on somebody. I know Greg mentioned Pullen coming in, kind of shouldering the responsibility of like running the offense. But I think when you look at Walter Davis, I mean, granted, now you don't just have one mid-major up transfer, you have 2, but at least theoretically that lightens the load to where Pullen's not just going to have to be the only guy who can initiate the offense. I think, and with Walter Davis, like just looking at his Walter Clayton, sorry, I'm mixing up my Walters here. With Walter Clayton coming in.
You were going with your name thing, Riley.
Yeah.
I really think that was it in my mind where with Riley Kugel just got me thinking about my own name. But yeah, with Clayton coming in, just his efficiency numbers he put up at Iona, I think are those I know it's the MAC, but they still kind of bode well. Like, I'm intrigued by the fact that he's like a 40+% shooter. And that was like the exact opposite of Kyle Lofton, who shot like 20 something percent for his career at St. Bonaventure's. Like, I think Clayton's ability to shoot either off the catch or off the bounce can really help open things up a little bit. And hopefully you're not going to see like just the spacing averse lineups where you're playing Kyle Lofton at the 1 and Alex Fudge at the 3 and Kawasi Reeves, who I still love. Like, y'all know how high I am on Georgia Tech, but the man has not shot well through 2 seasons of college ball. So, I think last year I kind of saw the vision of Florida becoming a top 15 team because I low-key loved Alex Fudge too. I was like, Fudge and Reeves, best perimeter duo in the SEC loading. To where I'm not ready I'm not ready to go that in on them. Yeah, with Fudge, I just saw a couple of his like defensive highlights at LSU that had me thinking he was the next big thing, but we won't talk about that. But so I'm not ready to
Great
go
take
like
from the
that
man
in
that
on
has
Florida
Georgia
yet.
Tech in the Sweet 16.
But yeah, I think they can become like they'll have some weeks where they're in the top 25 and that nice little 17 to 25 range, the Cincinnati Xavier range, as the program formerly known as Titus and Tate used to say. They'll have a couple of those weeks.
I think it bodes well for Clayton in particular that the numbers he put up last season as sophomore were very similar to what he did as a freshman. So it wasn't just a 1 year thing. That's kind of who he is. And I do think there's a little bit of difference playing for just a MAC team versus playing for Rick Pitino at Iona. Like, Rick Pitino brought in a different caliber of player at Iona than, even just typical Iona teams do. So I think there's some of that there. I want to make
Brian.
Go ahead.
I would be really, really, really excited about what Todd Golden could do with this roster and maybe overachieve with this roster if he was still in the West Coast Conference trying to finish third in the West Coast. Like, I would buy maybe they could finish third. Same areas in that, not in the SEC.
I am not defending it. I think they're going to end up being a bubble team probably this year, but it's going to be interesting to watch. I want to make sure we talk about Arizona a little bit here. I want to make sure we talk about UNC too, but I'll leave that to Riley. But Arizona to me is interesting because there are these really high expectations around that program, and fittingly so for the program that Arizona is, fittingly so for the kind of program that Tommy Lloyd has led each of the last couple of years, right? Like that, the trajectory they are on, they should be a Final Four contender. Absolutely. But there's a lot of unknowns kind of riding on that happening this season. Caleb Love being option number 1, right? Any team that brings in Caleb Love is automatically going to be an intriguing team to me because we know what his highs are. We also know what his lows are. Both of them actually pretty well. I'm excited to see him in Tommy Lloyd's offense. I think it really accentuates what he does well in terms of getting in transition and attacking the basket. Just a matter of if Caleb Love will do that or if it will be the ball stopper that he was during his really all of last season for UNC. But it's not just him because Arizona is expecting Kylan Boswell to take a big step forward. They're expecting Jaden Bradley from Alabama to become a guy more than a role player than he was at Alabama. Omar Ballo has been very, very good, but he doesn't have Tubelis next to him anymore. They're expecting Pell Larson to take a step forward and be a little bit more than just the kind of role player that he's been. You have this group of guys that all have questions, are all talented, with a coach that still is 30 years a head coach, right? He's had a very good career, both at Arizona and then with his time as the assistant at Gonzaga, obviously. So there is some track record built up there, but this is the first time where it really is like his team, where it's the guys that he's put together. He's got his handprints all over this more so than guys that were left when he took over from Sean Miller's tenure. I think Arizona will be good. I think there's a chance they could be very, very good. I also think there's a chance that the wheels don't fall off, but it's very underwhelming. Greg, what do you think?
So I'm glad you brought them up because they were my backup to Kansas. But I feel like they're my backup because of the same reasons I was curious about Hunter. I'm curious about Caleb. on any roster. I just am. And what I will say is I'm probably too high on Tommy Lloyd. I think he's one of my 5 favorite coaches in the country. I think it's only a matter of time before he really breaks through and has like NCAA tournament success and establishes himself as one of the premier guys in the game. But part of that's just because I'm a sucker for this type of offense. Like,
Oh yeah.
my dream for Arizona under Tommy Lloyd has been like maybe they can be Iowa but with defense. Like that would be awesome if that could happen. And they kind of hinted like their defense wasn't bad last year, and the offense was elite at times. But then they still went out in the NCAA tournament early on a cold shooting night where everyone tightened up late, and they still couldn't get a stop. So it's kind of had me reevaluating things a little. As far as this roster goes, I like the bones of it a lot. I think it was a good decision by Caleb. Like if I were him and I originally committed to Michigan and then I ended up on this Arizona roster, like I don't know how you stumbled blindly into that opportunity, but that's an awesome upgrade. But I do worry that there's a lot of mouths to feed in the backcourt, and a lot of mouths to feed doesn't map well with Caleb Love. Like Boswell, I think should like warrants a breakout season and the ball in his hands a lot. I think Jaden Bradley, I would like to see him get more opportunities. I don't know if he's anticipating he gets more or not. I'm assuming he transferred from Alabama to Arizona to have the ball in his hands more and have a bigger role. And then Caleb Love swoops in. I'm a little surprised he didn't reportal, to be honest. And then Pell Larson's the returning guy who like we keep waiting for a breakout from. So I'm gonna trust Tommy Lloyd. Like I'll keep my hat in the Tommy Lloyd ring for another season, mostly because I do think like looking back on it, he was able to navigate Kirk Risa and have really good teams built around Kirk Risa, and that's a good it's a good sign of what he could do with Caleb Love.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. Like the intriguing aspect to me, like there is that obvious bottom with issues that you just brought up, Greg. They're also intriguing to me because I see a world where this works really well and they win a championship. Like
Okay,
that
let
is
me
not
speak.
that is not an outlandish scenario for me.
All right, let me speak on Caleb Love for a minute, and I'll clarify my stance on him. He's always welcome back to Chapel Hill in my mind. Gave us one of like the 3 best moments in UNC history. Maybe that's high. One of the best moments in UNC history. I love what he did for Carolina, specifically as a sophomore at UNC. This past season, I kind of want to forget. I don't think I'll ever watch a single highlight from junior year Caleb Love and super senior Pete Nance. I got love for those guys, appreciate their time, but this season was pretty tough to watch. That being said, I think some of the being enamored with this fit under Tommy Lloyd, I see it. It's great in theory, but Caleb Love was not a particularly good basketball player in transition anytime UNC tried to run last year. Like there were multiple 3-on-1 fast breaks where UNC was the team with 3 that resulted in a turnover or a missed basket. Even some of the times where, I mean, he missed a dunk against Duke, just I think had an open lane and clanked it off the back iron in the Dean Dome, and it was a game that UNC lost by 4. And one of those baskets was at the like kind of a garbage time Kyle Filipowski dunk. Like if he makes that dunk, we're looking at a different outcome of that game potentially. Maybe it's enough for UNC to get into the tournament, and there's not quite like the black spot on them now. But even aside from that, with his shortcomings in transition, I think Arizona's shown that they can have spacing with 2 bigs under Tommy Lloyd. But Keshad Johnson, I think he's an awesome defender. I think he's a great pickup. I'm kind of bullish on Tommy Lloyd getting the most out of him, but he's so much less offensively skilled than Azuolas Tubelis. And there's no one like Courtney Ramey or Cedric Henderson who are going to be 40% shooters to sort of make up with some of the spacing issues. I mean, Bradley's a non-shooter. Boswell hasn't proven it yet. And like Caleb Love is going to have his nights. There are going to be Pac-12 games where he turns into God and scores 35 points to beat USC or something, and Arizona fans are going to go nuts, and it's a ton of fun to be on the receiving end of that, to see that happen for your team. But there are also nights where he'll probably shoot 2 for 10, 3 for 13 from 3, and he's just not going to have it. And unless, again, it's kind of the same thing that we said about Bill Self with being able to manage egos. It comes down to, can Tommy Lloyd do that? Can Tommy Lloyd rein him in, or get something out of him mentally, or help him take that next step that Hubert never was able to?
Yeah, I think my issue with Arizona is just you know what they have they're going to put a 7 foot player on the floor at all times. They have 4 on the roster. They brought in that 7-2 kid from Lithuania. Umar Bal is going to start, but whoever, whether it's Henri Visar or someone else, is going to come up behind him. They're going to have a 7 footer. They're going to have 2 to 3 ball handlers on the floor at all times. If you consider Pell Larson, who can play make, one of those between him, Boswell, Love, Bradley. It's that wing spot because they bring in Keisha Johnson, who I'm assuming is going to start at the 4, and then it's KJ Lewis and Tatvilas Tabelis. Because I think Morauskas is like a true 4. So like their wings, they're not big on the wing. They're probably going to start 2 or 3 guards and have a small 4, and then play a 7 footer, which can work. But if they get into a more slowed down game where they can't get out in transition, and we've seen that happen with teams like Gonzaga, where then all of a sudden they're just small. They'll have the 7 footer, but outside of that, they're small. They don't have the length to defend in the half court that you'd want to see, and that's my only worry, because they added Keisha Johnson. That's a great defensive option, but outside of that, get them in the half court. I think they're pretty beatable on that end of the floor.
Riley, can I tell you what I would do if I was Tommy Lloyd this year? And obviously you too, Connor, but I'm going to Riley on this because you are the Caleb Love expert here. If I'm Tommy Lloyd, I don't even play Caleb Love until the NCAA tournament. He doesn't suit up for me once. I post to an NCAA tournament like a 2, a 3 seed, finish second in the Pac-12 without sleeping. Jaden Bradley gets 30 minutes a game. Boswell's happy. Everybody's happy. And then we roll the ball out against a 14 seed in round 1, and Caleb Love emerges, and we just tell him, take whatever shots you want, go kill. Like, it would work.
You got to make it. You just got to go fully into like the WWE style entrance, though. You need like Caleb Love entrance music. You need to bring Vince McMahon as like as the play-by-play or color commentator for that particular game, because just lean fully into the theatrics with it, because that's kind of the vibe I'm getting, envisioning that play out.
See, my only issue with that is that it's obvious it takes a certain number of shots to keep Caleb Love happy. He's going to try and make up for all those shots he didn't get while sitting out for 31 games in that one game.
That's true, but counterpoint, and no offense to the people that attend Chapel Hill, Riley, I think he could have some pleasant distractions at Arizona. And we might want to keep him under house arrest, maybe, like make sure he's not able to engage with his teammates' social circles. But yeah, I think there's enough. I think we could get tomorrow, because if you unlock the good parts of Caleb Love in March, we've seen what can happen. You just don't want it to derail a whole season before
that. Connor, you want to bring us home on that note?
Yeah. I figure we could end with maybe just 1 minute. We don't have to go back and forth on them, but pick a mid-major team or a high-major team no one talks about that you think could be better than what people are expecting this year, and then we'll bring it home at the end. So we'll start off with you, Riley.
Let's see. I've already gone to bat for Clemson a number of times, which is getting embarrassing at this point. I'm going to give a shout out to Nebraska, and this will be a little tease for what I want to discuss on Sleepers Media this week. But I like that they bring Tominaga back. I really like this transfer, Bryce Williams from Charlotte. That this might be the most Sean Paul type thing you hear from me all offseason. But I think Bryce Williams is a hooper who is coming from, like we just saw how good of a league Conference USA was last year, coming from a good defensive scheme. And he's like kind of that nice 6'7" shooting wing that any coach wants to have right now. So I don't know. I think that he's someone who will translate to the Big Ten pretty well and can maybe even start. So I like some of the infrastructure that Nebraska brings back, and maybe we see Hoiberg get to his winning ways, because, the Big Ten kind of has a soft middle again. So that's a little tease for Nebraska.
I like that call out, and now I'm excited for tomorrow. We need more Tominaga love in general in this world. I'm going to go to your world, Riley. You picked a Big Ten team. I'm going to pick an ACC team. I am really intrigued and excited to watch Syracuse this season, mostly because I think Judah Mintz is really, really good. Like, not just fun anymore. He's really good. I'm a little surprised he's back, to be honest. I thought he's a guy who could have won some NBA teams over with workouts, and he just kind of seemed like the prototype, like, yeah, my coach is leaving, I'm going to leave guy. But no, he's back, and I think he's going to be really good. I don't know. Like, I've heard a lot of rumors with Starling that there might be some things to be concerned about, but like on paper, I'm very excited to watch a Mintz Starling backcourt together. And more importantly, like, there's a chance that just removing Jim Boeheim from that program could lead to some positivity. And credit to him for his whole career. He obviously had a ton of success. I was a huge 2-3 zone lover in my early years until he kind of really went crazy between his years. But I just am curious. I'm curious what a Syracuse team looks like post Boeheim, and I think it's a pretty talented one for their first year without him.
I'm going to go to the team that's going to play latest whenever they do play. I think there is a reason this year to stay up for Hawaii. Uh, I know last year they had a top 60 defense, but nobody knew about it. I think they set their conference record. I don't think it was a national record, but at least conference record for the fewest assists per game allowed. They were number one in the country in fewest assists per shot made, and number one in the country in fewest 3 points per field goals. So they defend the perimeter really well. They bring back their two key perimeter guys from last year. They add Juan Munoz, who's hurt his leg twice in a row for them now. Aaron Gano's I spoke with him the other day, pretty excited for what Juan Munoz can bring from a 3-point shooting perspective, because that was their downfall last year. Right? They didn't shoot well from three. They bring Juan Munoz, Ryan Rapp, who was a Washington State transfer that got hurt last year. It can be a solid 3-point shooting option. Noel Coleman shot over 40% the year before, shot like 25% last year, something like that. They bring in Justin McCoy from UNC, bring in Matthew Cotton from a pretty good Yale team to round out that front court with Bernardo da Silva. And they have this kid who I think is going to make people's eyes pop in Morsek, because he played 9 minutes per game last year, and he averaged like 3 rebounds and a block in those 9 games. He's a 7-footer, pretty big bodied, was a freshman last year, I believe, a sophomore this year. This is a team where I think UC Santa Barbara still the favorite in the Big West. But if there's a team that's going to crash the party and like take it from them, I think it's this Hawaii team if they stay healthy. But it just gives us more basketball to watch, because no one plays when Hawaii plays home games, because they play at like 10 p.m. my time. So if you're up at 2 a.m. in the middle of the night, Greg, with your daughter, and you're ready for some college hoops, watch Hawaii. I think they're going to be really good.
So I bet a lot of Hawaii unders last year, because I was one of the few people who realized how good their defense was. And I can't tell you the joy it brought me. Like, it's 3:15 a.m. Eastern sometimes, and like the graphic pops on screen that it's a 7-minute scoreless drought for both teams. I crave that. Like, once a month, I remember how fun that was, and I crave it. So great call out there, and I like their ads too. For the record, like, Justin McCoy is going to Hawaii. That's awesome. I'm excited for it.
Yeah,
and I think
I was gonna say that's a
and
great.
I think the other thing is,
I was gonna say that's a great pool.
Go ahead, Riley.
Yeah, for the three of us who all have. I mean, Greg has a newborn. I'll have a newborn when the season starts. You have a son who's 1. I guess he's probably sleeping through the night now, Connor. But great pool for some late night East Coast viewing. And hey, one more shout out to my name, Juan Munoz. My mom's maiden name is Munoz, so we might as well check all the boxes.
And they finished 2 games out of first place last year. Here are their results in conference play in overtime or decided by 2 or fewer points. A loss in overtime to Cal State Fullerton, 79-72. A 1-point loss 65-64 to UC Santa Barbara, a 1-point loss 52-51 to Fullerton, a 2-point loss 54-52 to UC Riverside, and then they lost 62-60 in overtime, I believe, to Cal State Fullerton again. They lost every single game in conference decided by 2 points or fewer in regulation. That is insane. And they only were 2 games out of first. They win one of those. If it's the Santa Barbara one, they're tied for the conference title. So I think people sleep on the Big West anyways, because it's the Big West. But I think people are giving UC Santa Barbara like they're going to run away with this conference, when I just don't know if that's the case, given what Hawaii has, if they're fully healthy. Well, that's going to do it for us. For my co-hosts, Riley Davis and Brian Ralph, I'm Connor Hope. Thanks again to Greg Waddell for joining us, and we will talk to you guys next time.
Basketball, basketball, college. Basketball, basketball, college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa, basketball, college. Come on. Basketball, basketball, college. Oh. Basketball, basketball, college. Whoa, basketball, college.